Space was quiet, too quiet. High above a small blue planet, a massive alien ship drifted without sound. Its dark metal surface reflected the distant light of a yellow star. Inside the command chamber, dozens of alien officers watched glowing screens filled with data, symbols, and moving lines. The planet below was called Earth. To the Galactic Alliance, Earth was nothing special. Low technology, divided nations, no unified space fleet. A weak world. Commander Velter, leader of the scouting fleet, stood with his hands behind his back. His tall figure was still, but his sharp eyes moved across the screens. "Confirm the scan," he said calmly. An officer replied. "No energy shields detected. No orbital defense platforms. Only old satellites and primitive space stations." Velter felt no surprise. This matched all the reports. Another officer spoke, sounding confident. "The dominant species calls itself human. Physically weak, short lifespan. No record of any galactic contact." The commander nodded slowly. Earth was marked for observation only. A simple first contact, maybe a warning, and then, maybe later, control. But then, something strange happened. One of the screens flickered. An officer leaned closer. "Commander, human satellites are changing position." Velter turned his head. "Changing how?" "They are aligning," the officer said, his voice a little less certain now, not randomly, with purpose. The room grew quieter. Another screen lit up. "Multiple underground facilities are opening across the planet. Heat signals are rising rapidly." Velter's eyes narrowed. "Military, yes, but not chaotic. Very organized." That was odd. Most first contact species panicked. They sent loud messages into the void. Some begged, some threatened, some fired their primitive weapons in fear. Earth did none of that. No emergency signals flooded space. No civilian ships launched in a desperate exodus. No global broadcasts screamed in fear. The planet remained calm, too calm. Far below the alien ship, human soldiers moved into position. In vast deserts, hidden doors opened in the sand, revealing deep silos. In remote mountains, massive steel gates slid apart, exposing fortified bases. Under the oceans, dark shapes woke from a long sleep, their engines stirring silently. Men and women in simple uniforms checked weapons, maps, and screens. There was no shouting, no panic, only quiet, focused resolve. General Ethan Rowe stood in a command center buried deep beneath the Earth. He watched a large screen showing the alien ship hanging ominously above the planet. "Confirm visual," he said, his voice steady. A technician answered. "Confirmed. One large vessel. Unknown weapons, unknown shields." Rowe took a slow, deliberate breath. He had trained for this moment his entire life. Every single soldier on Earth had. "Any message from them?" he asked. "No, sir." Rowe nodded. "Then we don't speak first." Round the world, similar commands were given. "Wait, watch, prepare." Back in space, the alien fleet waited. Velter felt something he did not like, a deep, crawling unease. "Why are they not responding?" he asked the open air. An officer offered a theory. "Perhaps they do not understand what they are seeing." "Commander." Velter shook his head slowly. "Oh, their satellites adjusted the moment we arrived. They see us." He stepped closer to the main screen, looking down at the silent blue marble. "So why are they quiet?" Suddenly, a new signal appeared. A single, focused transmission. It was not loud, not desperate, not afraid. It was clear. Simple. The human language translated instantly by the alien systems. The message appeared on the main screen, stark and plain. "We see you. Do not land." The command chamber froze. Several officers stared in disbelief. "That is all," one asked in a whisper. "No greeting," said another. "No surrender." Velter felt a chill run through him. This was not how weak, primitive species spoke. This was the language of equals, or something more. "That message," he said slowly, the words heavy, "was not a request." Silence filled the room again, thick and heavy. "On Earth." General Rowe lowered the hand he had used to authorize the message. He did not smile. He did not relax. He turned to his staff. "Positions, all units ready," came the replies, echoing from every corner of the planet. Rowe looked at the screen one last time. "Hold," he said. In space, the alien fleet adjusted its formation. Smaller ships moved closer to Earth's atmosphere, like predators testing the edge of a territory. An officer spoke carefully. "Commander, should we respond?" Velter thought for a long moment. He had overseen dozens of first contacts. He had pacified worlds and brought them into the Alliance's fold. This one felt dangerously different. "They warned us," he said, almost to himself, without a trace of fear. He straightened his posture. His decision made. Send a landing craft. Small force only. Test their response. Yes, Commander. A single alien ship detached from the fleet and began its descent through the clouds. On Earth, alarms did not sound. There were no sirens, no screams, only silent, coordinated movement. Human soldiers locked in their targets. As the alien craft entered the atmosphere, its pilot expected chaos below. He expected missiles. He expected lasers. He expected some kind of panicked, futile attack. Instead, it meant nothing. Absolute silence. Then, without warning, every human defense system across the entire planet activated at once. They weren't firing. They were just locking on. Thousands upon thousands of targeting signals from land, sea, and hidden silos all converged on the single alien craft. The pilot froze, his console screaming with lock-on alerts from every direction. Back on the alien command ship, alarms blared. Commander, we are being targeted from everywhere. Valter stared at the screen. A map of Earth now covered in a web of targeting vectors all aimed at one tiny point. Earth wasn't shouting. Earth was aiming. For the first time in his long, decorated military life, Commander Valter understood something terrifying. Humans were not afraid. They were ready. They had been waiting. And whatever happened next would not just change Earth. It would change the history of the entire galaxy. The landing craft sliced through Earth's upper atmosphere, its descent controlled and deliberate. Inside the small ship, the pilot's hands were a white-knuckled grip on the controls. A constellation of warning lights blinked across his console, yet no weapons fired. The human targeting signals were locked onto him. Steady, patient, almost too patient. He forced his voice to remain calm, speaking into the calms. Command, human defenses are active, but they're holding fire. From the command ship orbiting high above, Valter listened in silence. His gaze was fixed on the live feed from the pilot's vessel. The image was stable, the planet below looking deceptively serene. Proceed, he ordered, his voice echoing with authority. Land near a population center. Observe their response. The craft adjusted its trajectory, descending toward a wide, open plain not far from a human city. In the distance, the soft glow of urban lights painted the horizon. The roads were eerily empty. The world looked peaceful, almost welcoming. With a gentle thud, the ship touched down. There were no explosions, no panicked crowds, no screams of fear. Just a strange, heavy silence. The hatch opened with a low hiss, and four alien soldiers stepped out onto the damp earth. Their armor was a marvel of engineering, smooth, shining, and utterly deadly. Each soldier carried a weapon capable of melting steel with a single burst. They scanned the area, their movements precise and practiced. Air is safe, one reported. No hostile movement detected. Watching from his command chair, Valter felt a persistent sense of unease. Something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. Several kilometers away, hidden in the dark, Captain Mara Hayes lay flat against the ground, her rifle held steady. Through her night vision scope, the aliens were clear as day. Her team was a ghost, surrounding the landing zone, concealed in tall grass and shallow, pre-dug trenches. Visual confirmed, she whispered into her mic, her voice a calm counterpoint to her thundering heart. For targets. No civilians nearby. A soft crackle came through her earpiece. It was command. Hold position. Do not engage unless ordered. Mara's reply was immediate. Understood. The alien soldiers moved farther from their craft, their confidence growing with every silent second. One of them knelt and planted a small, cylindrical device into the ground. Scanning planet structure, he announced. The device hummed to life. A moment later, he added, humans are everywhere. Underground. Mobile. Another soldier let out a light, condescending laugh. Primitive animals hiding in their holes. Mara heard the real-time translation through her headset. Her jaw tightened, but she remained perfectly still, a predator waiting for the right moment. Above them all, the alien fleet watched. Valter leaned forward as the planetary scan results flooded the main screen. An officer beside him spoke slowly, his tone laced with surprise. This world is prepared. Their forces are spread out, but interconnected. Valter narrowed his eyes. They've learned to hide well. Suddenly, a new signal flared on the alien displays. It wasn't a weapon lock. It was a message, short, direct, and broadcast on a universal frequency. A simple text appeared. Leave. This is your last warning. Valter felt an unfamiliar emotion stir within him. It wasn't anger, or even annoyance. It was a flicker of respect. Do they truly believe they can stop us? An officer asked, bewildered. Valter answered quietly, his eyes still on the feed. They believe they must try. He raised his hand, a silent, final command. Begin limited engagement. On the ground, one of the alien soldiers took the cue. He lifted his weapon and fired a brilliant beam of energy straight into the night sky. It was the signal. Mara's command was instantaneous. Engage. The night exploded. In a single, fluid motion, human soldiers rose from the earth like specters. Smoke grenades bloomed, obscuring vision and sensors. A swarm of small, silent drones lifted into the air, painting targets with telltale red lights. The first volley of human gunfire spattered harmlessly against the advanced alien armor. But the humans adapted instantly. Mara adjusted her aim, targeting a vulnerable joint in the armor of the nearest soldier. She fired. The bullet struck true. The alien warrior staggered, a surprised grunt escaping its lips. Armor breach, an alien voice shouted over their calms. The invaders returned fire. Their energy beams were devastating. Trees vaporized. The ground scorched and burned where the beams touched. 2 human soldiers fell, their positions instantly covered by their comrades. Mara didn't look back. Move. Flank left, she ordered. Her team split, moving fast and low, a coordinated dance of death. They didn't rush blindly. Every movement had a purpose. Every shot was calculated. The aliens were strong, their weapons terrifyingly powerful. But they were slow, their movements encumbered by their heavy armor. One turned to track a flanking soldier. In that split second, another human appeared directly behind him, slapping a small explosive charge onto the alien's back. The blast was small, but precise. The alien fell forward and didn't get up. Back in space, alarms blared across the command bridge. "Commander!" One unit neutralized, an officer yelled. Valter's eyes widened. "Neutralized? By these primitives? Show me everything," he commanded, his voice tight. The tactical display shifted, showing a bird's eye view of the chaos. The humans moved like a single organism. When one fell, another immediately provided covering fire. When one advanced, others protected their flanks. The alien soldiers fought with courage, but confusion was beginning to set in. They retreat and attack at the same time. An officer observed, baffled. "There's no fear response. They aren't breaking." Valter clenched his jaw. On the ground, the battle was almost over. One alien soldier stood wounded, his weapon lost. He tried to rise, but his legs gave out. Mara approached him carefully, her rifle still raised. The alien looked up at her, his voice shaking with a mix of pain and disbelief. "Why do you fight? You cannot win this war." Mara's answer was simple and chilling. "We don't fight to win," she signaled her team. The alien was quickly and efficiently restrained. The last remaining alien soldier, seeing the fight was lost, activated a distress beacon. A pulse of light flashed into the sky. A moment later, he too was taken down. An unnatural silence fell over the field, broken only by the whisper of the wind through the smoking grass. Human soldiers immediately began checking on each other, lifting the wounded with quiet professionalism. They secured their prisoner. There were no cheers of victory. High above Earth, the alien fleet pulled back into a higher orbit. Valter stared at the screen, watching the captured soldier being moved away by the humans. "They did not celebrate," he said softly, almost to himself. "They did not pursue." An officer swallowed hard. "Commander, humans lost soldiers, yet they held formation to the very end." Valter's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a dawning, terrible realization. Because they expected loss, he turned away from the screen, his gaze lost in the star-dusted void. "This species does not fight for conquest. They don't fight for glory." He paused. "They fight to endure." In a hardened bunker deep beneath the surface, General Rowe watched the same feed on his own monitor. "Status?" he asked, his voice rough. "Contact ended," came the reply. "Enemy captured. We have casualties." Rowe closed his eyes for a single, heavy second. Then he opened them, his resolve like steel. Prepare for the next wave. In space, Valter knew, with absolute certainty, that something fundamental had just changed. This wasn't a simple first contact. It wasn't a quick conquest. This was the beginning of a war that would not be decided by superior technology or brute strength. It would be decided by will, and humanity had just shown its hand. The captured alien, Kethral, sat inside a white metal room. The walls were smooth, seamless. No chains held him. No guards stood close. A soft, even light filled the space, and the air moved gently, warm and clean. This was confusing. In his experience across countless worlds, prisoners were broken first. Here, he was simply waiting. Kethral was a veteran soldier of the Galactic Alliance, a warrior who had faced many species in battle, but none, not a single one, had ever fought like the humans. The silence was broken by the quiet hiss of a door sliding open. 2 humans entered. They wore simple, functional uniforms, with no heavy armor and no visible weapons. One was older, his hair gray, his eyes carrying the weight of long years. The other was a younger woman, her posture calm, her gaze alert and direct. They sat across the table from him. "My name is Dr. Samuel Reed," the older human said, his voice slow and measured. "This is Captain Mara Hayes." The captain, Mara, met Kethral's multifaceted eyes without a flicker of fear. "We want to talk," Reed continued. "No harm will come to you." Kethral studied their faces, searching for the deception he knew must be there. "You are lying," he stated, his voice a low gravel. "Your kind kills my kind." Mara's response was immediate and sharp. "Only when you tried to kill us first." And in that moment, Kethral felt something strange, something he did not expect to find in an enemy interrogation room. The undeniable ring of truth, far above the tranquil quiet of that room, floating in the dark void of space. The alien fleet had pulled back. The crushing confidence they had brought into this solar system was gone, replaced by a gnawing uncertainty. In the command chamber of the flagship, Supreme Commander Velter watched the battle recordings for the 10th time. "Replay," he ordered, his voice tight. On the holographic display, the human soldiers moved with a terrifying purpose. They weren't just fighting, they were protecting each other. They formed living shields for their wounded. They executed tactical retreats not out of fear, but to preserve their strength, only to advance again with renewed ferocity when the moment was right. They act as if they are a single mind, an officer observed in awe. Velter shook his head slowly. "No," he corrected, his eyes fixed on the display. "They act like many minds, all driven by one singular goal." And it was the nature of that goal that deeply disturbed him. Back in the White Room on Earth, Dr. Reed placed a small device on the table between them. It whirred to life, projecting a cascade of vivid images into the air. Cities teeming with life, vast blue oceans, the faces of children laughing, of old people smiling, countless species of animals in their natural habitats. "Do you know what this is?" Reed asked gently. Kethral answered with what he thought was the obvious truth. "Your world." Reed shook his head. "No, this is what we protect." Captain Mara Hayes leaned forward, her expression intense. "You asked why we fight with such desperation," she said, her words echoing a question Kethral had screamed on the battlefield. "Yes," he replied. "You know you cannot win." Mara gave a small, grim nod. "Maybe, but we can make damned sure you lose more than you could ever hope to gain." A chill, cold and unfamiliar, traced its way down Kethral's spine. Aboard the alien command ship, the reports kept flooding in, each one more perplexing than the last. "Commander, their communication networks remain active even after sustaining critical damage. They reroute and rebuild instantaneously. Commander, their evacuation priorities are baffling. They moved their wounded soldiers out of the hot zones first, not their leaders or command staff. Commander, we are detecting no signs of widespread panic in their civilian populations. In fact, production has increased." Velter listened in a heavy silence. This defied all strategic models. Most species feared death above all else. They broke and ran when losses mounted. Their morale would shatter. Humans did not. They just kept coming. "Why?" he whispered to the uncaring silence of his command bridge. "In the holding room, Doctor." Reed offered an explanation. "Humans learned a very hard lesson early in our evolution," he said, his tone like a professor lecturing a student. "We aren't the strongest species. We aren't the fastest. We don't have claws or venom or natural armor. So we learned to rely on the only advantage we had, each other." He paused, letting the words sink in. "When one of us falls, another stands up to take their place." Kethral's mind flashed back to the chaos of the battlefield. He remembered a human soldier, grievously wounded, propped against a rock, continuing to lay down covering fire so others could retreat. He remembered seeing two humans dash into a storm of plasma fire to drag their injured comrade to safety. They did not leave anyone behind. It wasn't logical. It wasn't efficient. It was something else entirely. "You teach this strategy?" Kethral asked, the concept foreign to his warrior caste. Mara shook her head, a faint, sad smile on her lips. "We don't teach it. We live it." And across the globe, humanity was living it. In quiet unison, the world was transforming. Factories that once made cars now churned out armored vehicles. Old, forgotten weapons systems were being refurbished and modernized. New, desperate tactics were being developed and shared instantly across borders that had once divided nations. There were no grand speeches from politicians, There were no victory parades. There was only the quiet, determined hum of work. General Rowe stood before a global command council, his face projected onto dozens of screens, addressing leaders from every nation. "We did not choose this war," he said, his voice steady and resolute, "but we will finish it." Together in the virtual room, there were no arguments, no political maneuvering, only solemn nods of agreement. Aboard the alien fleet, Vailter had gathered his senior officers. "We have clearly underestimated their tenacity," one commander admitted. "They have lost entire divisions," another countered, still clinging to the old logic. "Their front lines are thin. They will break." Vailter raised a hand, silencing the debate. "They will not break," he said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument. He gestured toward the large viewscreen showing the swirling blue and white marble of Earth. "You are failing to understand their motivation. Humans do not fight for territory or for power. They fight for memory. They fight for home." The officers fell silent, the weight of their commander's words settling upon them. Vailter made his decision. "Begin a full psychological analysis," he ordered. "I want to know how they think. I want to understand their art, their history, their philosophies, everything." An officer hesitated. "Commander, what if our analysis is shared? What if others in the Galactic Alliance see this?" Vailter's gaze was distant as he answered quietly. "Then the galaxy will learn what it means to threaten a human's home." Back in the White Room, Kethral had one final question. "If you know we are stronger, that our technology is superior, that your defeat is a statistical probability," he asked, genuinely curious, "why not surrender and save yourselves?" Captain Mara Hayes stood up. She looked down at him, her eyes clear and unwavering. "Because if we surrender today," she said, her voice low but powerful, "there is no tomorrow for anyone, ever again." She turned without another word and walked out. "Doctor," Reed gave Kethral a final, sorrowful look before following her, leaving the alien warrior alone in the silence. And for the first time in his long life, Kethral understood. Humans didn't believe they would survive. They believed they must survive. The two concepts were worlds apart. High above, Vailter watched the planet Earth turn slowly below him, a beautiful jewel he had intended to conquer. He now knew this was not a war he could end quickly with force. This was a test of will, and somewhere in the cold, logical core of his being, a terrifying truth began to bloom. If humans were given enough time, the galaxy would never be the same again. The galaxy was watching, far beyond our small blue planet. Hidden sensors and silent observers from countless worlds turned their attention toward us. They had heard the reports, whispers of a species still bound to its home star, a species that had dared to resist the Galactic Alliance. Most didn't believe it. Such defiance was unheard of, impossible. Above Earth, the alien fleet returned, this time in full, overwhelming strength. Hundreds of ships formed a vast, menacing ring in high orbit, their weapon ports glowing with a cold, terrifying power. This wasn't a test. This was to be a punishment. Aboard the alien flagship, Commander Vailter stood at the center of the command chamber. His face was a mask of calm, but a storm of heavy thoughts raged within. Final warning was issued. An officer reported, his voice crisp and formal. The humans did not withdraw. Vailter gave a slow, deliberate nod. They were never going to. He raised his hand, a simple gesture that held the fate of a world. Begin orbital pressure. Limited destruction. The first beams of alien energy struck Earth's outer defenses. Old satellites, relics of a bygone era of space exploration, vanished in silent flashes of light. Space stations, humanity's fragile footholds in the void, burned and fell from the sky like tragic, man-made shooting stars. On the surface, alarms finally sounded. But it wasn't the sound of panic. It was a rhythm, a cadence. Across the globe, cities went dark, not from attack, but by design. Power grids shifted, diverting energy to vast underground networks. Civilians, long since drilled for this day, moved into deep earth shelters with a quiet resolve. And on the surface, human soldiers took their places, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of their tactical displays. In the deepest command bunker, shielded by miles of rock and steel, General Rowe stood before a holographic map of the world. His voice was as steady as the bedrock around him. "All units, initiate Phase 2. Remember your training. Remember what's at stake." Across the planet, humanity responded as one. From hidden silos, missiles rose on pillars of fire. From camouflaged runways, advanced aircraft screamed into the embattled skies. Beneath the waves, naval fleets moved like silent predators. Earth did not strike back in a blind fury. It struck back with cold, calculated timing. The alien fleet expected chaos, a desperate and disorganized defense. Instead, they were met with precise, frustrating patterns. Human attacks came in relentless waves, small, sharp, and surgical. They didn't target the massive warships. They targeted their eyes and ears, sensors, communication arrays, targeting systems. On the alien bridge, confusion turned to alarm. "Commander, our targeting systems are disrupted," an officer shouted. "Multiple sensor failures across the fleet." Another cried out, "They're blinding us." Velter watched the streams of tactical data collapse into static and nonsense. A chilling realization dawned on him. "They are not trying to destroy us," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They are trying to slow us down." Down on the scorched surface, Captain Mara Hayes led her unit through the burning ruins of what was once a bustling city district. The buildings were scarred and broken, but the streets were empty. The civilians were long gone. "Sector clear," a soldier reported over the comm. Mara looked up at the sky, where the alien ships hung like angry red wounds against the smoke-filled clouds. "They hit the cities," one of her soldiers said, his voice laced with bitterness. Mara shook her head. "No, they hit symbols. They hit empty shells." The aliens had wasted their power on shadows, while humanity's true strength, its people, were safe. Back in space, a small, unassuming human strike group made a move that looked like pure suicide. Old ships, outdated by galactic standards, flew straight into the heart of the enemy formation. On the alien flagship, an officer laughed. "Are they serious? They send their museum pieces against us?" But then, the human ships didn't just get destroyed. They detonated, not in defeat, but with a terrible, calculated purpose. The explosions weren't meant to cause damage, but to create chaos. They released massive, dense clouds of superheated metal fragments, a primitive but brutally effective screen that clogged sensors and shredded energy shields. The entire alien fleet staggered, their perfect formation thrown into disarray. Velter felt the air leave his lungs. "They are using themselves as weapons," an officer whispered in disbelief. Velter's voice was quiet, filled with a new, unwelcome respect. "No, they are buying time." And across the galaxy, the observers who had been watching with casual interest were now recording everything with frantic intensity. "This is impossible," one renowned alien scholar broadcasted on a secure channel. "A pre-spaceflight civilization should have fallen within the first hour." Another replied, his voice strained, They adapt too fast." On Earth, the war machine churned without pause. Factories, hidden deep underground, operated 24/7. Civilians volunteered for any role they could fill: logistics, manufacturing, communications. Engineers slept beside the very machines they were maintaining. Medics treated the wounded, patched them up, and returned to the front lines. Nobody asked if they would win. The only question was how long they could hold on. General Rowe watched the casualty reports scroll across his screen. The numbers were high, heartbreakingly so. But he did not look away. "Maintain steady pressure," he ordered his commanders across the globe. "Don't get greedy. Don't chase. Stick to the plan." In high orbit, Commander Veltor was facing a truth that threatened to shatter the very foundation of the Galactic Alliance's power. The longer this battle dragged on, the worse it became for them. Human tactics were evolving in real time, changing in mere hours. Alliance doctrine, by contrast, took years, even decades, to change. "Commander," a senior officer said, his voice trembling slightly, "we are losing control of the engagement. Our losses are exceeding acceptable parameters for a pacification action." Velter closed his eyes for a brief moment, the holographic displays of Earth's resistance burning an imprint on his mind. He saw it now, with perfect, horrifying clarity. The humans weren't just trying to survive this attack. They were trying to send a message. They were teaching the entire galaxy a lesson. He opened his eyes. His decision was made. "Full withdrawal to high orbit," he commanded. A wave of shock rippled through the command chamber. "Withdraw," an officer stammered. "Commander, we are the Galactic Alliance. We do not withdraw from a pre-spaceflight world." Velter's voice was as firm and unyielding as tempered steel. "This is no longer a simple war." The colossal fleet, the pride of the Alliance, pulled back. The relentless orbital bombardment ceased, and the galaxy noticed. On Earth, a fragile silence slowly returned. The sky still glowed with the fires of re-entry and residual energy, but the attacks had stopped. Captain Mara Hayes sat slumped against a broken wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her hands, which had been so steady just hours before, now shook uncontrollably. A medic knelt beside her. "You okay, Captain?" She just nodded, unable to speak. I will be. Nearby, soldiers were helping each other to their feet, their faces covered in soot and grime. There were no cheers, no victory cries, just the profound, bone-deep relief of survival. Aboard the flagship, Thalter gazed at the image of Earth on the main view screen one last time. They should have broken, his first officer said, his voice a mixture of confusion and awe. Thalter answered softly, almost to himself. They cannot. He turned to face his crew, his expression grim. Send a full, unedited report to the Galactic Council, he said. All of it. Every data point, every casualty, every tactical analysis. An officer hesitated. Commander, this report, it will change things. For the entire galaxy. Thalter nodded slowly. That is why it must be sent. And across the unfathomable distances of space, the message spread like wildfire. A small, isolated world had faced the full might of the Alliance, and the Alliance had been the one to step back. For the first time in recorded history, a species yet to join the galactic community had forced the galaxy's reigning power to pause. Earth had not won a war, but Earth had stood its ground, and that, in itself, was enough to shock the stars. The war didn't end. It just changed shape. Across the galaxy, news of Earth spread quietly at first. It started as whispers in secure military channels. Then, trade networks paused, their routes suddenly rerouted. Old empires reviewed their borders, reinforcing positions that had been stable for centuries. A single thought, a single question, passed from world to world, from one species to another. If humans can resist, what else have we misunderstood? On the high world of Karesh Prime, the Galactic Council gathered in emergency session. Beings of every description, tall, wide, some without any clear shape at all, filled the grand chamber. At the center, a massive holographic screen flickered to life, showing recordings from the Earth conflict. Explosions bloomed silently in space. Small, determined human soldiers stood their ground against overwhelming odds. And then, the final, unbelievable image. Massive alien ships, the pride of the fleet, pulling back in retreat. When the screen went dark, a heavy silence filled the chamber. This is propaganda. One council member finally scoffed, his voice echoing in the stillness. A trick, a fabrication. But another, a being of crystalline form, replied, our own fleets recorded it. These are our sensor logs. Commander Thalter stood alone before them. His battle armor was dark, unpolished, still bearing the faint scars of the campaign. You ordered observation, he said, his voice low and steady. You have received the truth. A council elder, ancient and draped in ceremonial robes, leaned forward. Explain this. Explain how a species so divided, so fractured, could survive an assault from a unified fleet. Thalter chose his words with extreme care. They are divided in politics, he answered, not in purpose. A murmur of unease rippled through the room. They do not fight for expansion, Thalter continued, his gaze sweeping across the powerful figures before him. They fight for home. And that, council, is what makes them so very dangerous. Meanwhile, back on Earth, life continued under the silent shadow of the orbiting alien ships. Cities were being rebuilt, not with grand ceremony, but with a quiet, grim determination. Soldiers trained harder than ever before. Children went to school in deep underground bunkers, their classroom walls decorated with drawings of stars and shields, of heroes and hope. Human leaders did not celebrate their survival. They prepared. General Rowe stood before a smaller, more somber council of human nations. The galaxy is watching us now, he stated, his voice devoid of triumph. Every single move we make matters. One leader, her face etched with worry, asked the question on everyone's mind. Will they return? Rowe answered with brutal honesty. Yes. Then why not strike first? Another demanded. Show them we are not afraid. Rowe shook his head firmly. Because fear is precisely what they expect from us. Discipline. Restraint, that is what they will fear more. Far above the recovering planet, the alien fleet remained at a cautious distance. Scouts watched. Probes listened, analyzing every transmission, every energy signature. From the bridge of his flagship, Commander Thalter observed the human movements daily. They are building faster, an officer reported, gesturing to a tactical display. Their industrial output is accelerating, but they are not building larger fleets, Thalter noted, his eyes fixed on the data. He nodded slowly to himself. They are not just rebuilding, they are learning. And elsewhere in the vastness of the galaxy, the consequences of Earth's stand began to ripple outwards. A small, aggressive trade world abruptly canceled its planned invasion of a weaker neighbor. We cannot risk human attention, their ruler declared in a secret memo. A powerful empire, poised for conquest, suddenly delayed its campaign. If the humans interfere, one of their admirals warned, the cost of victory may be a price we cannot pay. The humans had not even left their own solar system, and yet, their presence, their potential, was now felt everywhere. Back on Earth, Captain Mara Hayes walked through a quiet training ground. Rows of new recruits, their faces young but their eyes serious, listened intently as she spoke. "They are stronger than us," she said, her voice clear and direct. "They have more ships, more resources, more technology. Do not ever believe otherwise." A young recruit raised a hand. "Then how do we win, Captain?" Mara offered a faint, steely smile. "We win by standing just 1 second longer than they expect us to." Above them, Vailter received new, perplexing orders from the Galactic Council. "Maintain distance," the message read. "No escalation, no withdrawal. Observe and report." He read the directive twice, trying to decipher the indecision behind the words. "They fear you now, Commander," his first officer said, standing beside him. Vailter corrected him without turning his gaze from the blue and white marble of Earth. "No, they do not fear me. They fear what the humans represent." In a secure research facility, Dr. Reese Reed reviewed captured alien data, searching for an edge. Patterns began to form across his multiple screens, a logic emerging from the chaos of alien code. "They see war as numbers," he said, speaking to General Rowe, who stood watching over his shoulder. "It's all an equation to them. Acceptable losses, resource expenditure, probability of outcome." Rowe listened quietly, his hands clasped behind his back. "They do not understand resolve," Reed continued, turning in his chair. "They have no variable for it. They think it's a finite resource that can be measured and depleted." Rowe nodded slowly, a thoughtful look on his face. "Good. Then we let them keep thinking that." In another part of the same facility, the captured alien pilot, Kethral, watched the humans from behind a transparent containment wall. He saw their soldiers train until they collapsed from exhaustion, only to push themselves back to their feet and continue. He saw their engineers work around the clock, their faces lit by welding torches and computer screens. "They do not stop," he whispered to himself, a sense of awe creeping into his voice. Captain Mara Hayes, on guard duty, stood nearby. "Neither would you," she said, her voice calm. "If this was your home." Kethral turned to look at her, truly seeing her for the first time. "The galaxy will never see your species as small again." Mara's reply was short and sharp as glass. "Good." At the Galactic Council, the debates grew more heated, more desperate. "We must control Earth now," one voice argued forcefully, "before their ideology of defiance spreads." But another voice quickly countered, "And how do we do that without proving their point? If we crush them, we risk creating a symbol of resistance that could inspire 1,000 rebellions." Vailter, summoned once more, spoke only a single sentence. "If you attack Earth again," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, "you will not end a species. You will create a legend." The entire chamber fell silent, and back on Earth, a new name began to spread across the alien networks. A designation born not of human propaganda, but of alien observation. Humans, they weren't called warriors, not primitives. They were called the unbreakable line, a species that didn't advance by conquering stars, but by refusing to fall. As the weeks turned into months, the alien ships slowly, almost imperceptibly, moved farther from Earth's orbit. They weren't leaving. They were watching, waiting. General Rowe stood beneath an open sky for the first time in what felt like an eternity. He looked up at the stars. They seemed different now, not distant and unreachable. They looked like a challenge. "We're still here," he said quietly to the night. Far above, from the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vailter watched the continents of Earth turn below, and in that moment, he finally understood. The humans didn't need to win the battles. They only needed to survive them, and in doing so, they had already changed the galaxy forever. The galaxy did not forget Earth. In the quiet that followed the storm, time passed, but attention remained. Alien fleets, once bold and arrogant, no longer crossed human space without extreme caution. Old trade routes, carved through the cosmos over millennia, were redrawn. Military plans, strategies honed through countless campaigns, were rewritten from scratch. Across every starfaring empire, a new rule was etched into their most sacred records: avoid direct conflict with humans, unless your very survival demands it. Above the blue jewel of Earth, the last of the alien ships finally receded, pulling back beyond the moon's silent orbit. This wasn't a retreat born of fear, nor was it the prelude to another attack. They were simply watching, waiting. On the bridge of his command vessel, Commander Vailter stood alone, The stars outside the main viewing window, once familiar and comforting, now seemed distant, their light less certain. A chime broke the silence. A message. It was a summons from the Galactic Council. Attendance was mandatory. He didn't need to read the details. He knew exactly what this was about. The Great Council Chamber on Karesh Prime, a place where the fate of worlds was decided, filled once more. Representatives from dozens of civilizations, their forms a kaleidoscope of life's infinite variety, took their designated places. The air was thick, heavy with unspoken worry and a tension you could almost taste. At the very center of the vast room, a holographic projection of Earth shimmered into existence, small dot blue, and defiantly unbroken. The Council Elder, a being whose age was measured in geological epochs, spoke first, their voice echoing with ancient authority. The human species has survived first contact, the Elder declared. This, by itself, changes nothing. A ripple of agreement, of relief, passed through some of the delegates. Vailter raised his head, his gaze fixed on the Elder. But the Elder continued, their tone shifting. The consequences of that survival, the change everything. Murmurs erupted across the chamber, a cacophony of whispers in 100 different tongues. The Elder's gaze fell upon Vailter. He was asked to speak. He stepped forward, his uniform immaculate, his posture rigid. I was ordered to observe their world, he began, his voice steady. Then, I was ordered to apply pressure, and finally, I was ordered to punish. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. At every stage, at every escalation, the humans responded not with the chaos we expected but with a terrifying clarity. A council member from a proud, warrior race, interrupted, their voice sharp with skepticism. They are still primitive. Their technology is rudimentary. Vailter turned and met their gaze without flinching. They are young, he corrected, his voice firm, not weak. He activated a final recording. The holographic display shifted, showing raw, unedited footage from the conflict. It showed human soldiers, under a hail of plasma fire, lifting their wounded allies onto their shoulders. It showed civilians, their cities in ruins, working tirelessly through the night to clear rubble and save strangers. There was no cheering, no boasts of victory, and absolutely no surrender. They do not fight for glory, Vailter explained, his voice softening slightly. They do not fight for conquest. They fight so that tomorrow exists. A profound silence fell over the chamber. Even the most hardened delegates were captivated. The Elder leaned forward, their ancient eyes seeming to pierce right through Vailter. What is your final recommendation, Commander? Vailter answered without a moment's hesitation. Recognize Earth as a protected world, he said, his voice ringing with conviction. Engage them as equals or never engage them at all. A wave of shock spread through the room. Equals, someone protested in disbelief. Vailter's voice remained calm, a beacon of reason in a sea of astonishment. They already act like one. Back on Earth, in a heavily fortified command center, General Rowe received a transmission from the depths of space. It wasn't encrypted. It carried no threat codes. It was, of all things, an invitation. The Galactic Council formally requested human representation at their next session. Not a demand for surrender. Not a summons for submission. Representation. The old general stood perfectly still for a long, quiet moment, the weight of 100 sleepless nights seeming to lift from his shoulders. Then, a faint, weary smile touched his lips. Well, I'll be, he murmured to the empty room. They're finally listening. Months later, a single human vessel sliced through the void, entering galactic space. It was not a large ship. It was not bristling with weapons, but it carried a cargo far rarer and more potent than any warhead. Trust. When the human ambassadors walked into the Great Council chamber, they did not bow. They did not make demands. They simply stood, their presence a quiet statement of fact. The Elder spoke again, their voice resonating with a new kind of respect. Humanity, the Elder said, your world, your resilience, has altered the balance of history. One of the human representatives, a diplomat named Anya Sharma, answered simply, her voice clear and unwavering. We did not try to. The Elder nodded slowly, a deep understanding in their ancient eyes. That, they replied, is precisely why you did. In the years that followed, the galaxy began to change. Laws were amended. Protected zones around developing worlds were expanded. The rights of smaller, less powerful civilizations were affirmed and strengthened, not because the humans asked for it, but because the other powers now feared what humans might do if those rights were ever ignored. Again, they had seen what humanity was willing to do to protect its own home. No one wanted to find out what they would do to protect another's. Back on Earth, Captain Mara Hayes walked through a quiet memorial park. Rows of names, countless names, were carved into polished black stone. She reached out and gently touched one. "They remember you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "All of you." Above her, the sky was clear and blue. There were no alien ships, no fire raining from the heavens, just the distant, peaceful stars. Miles above, Commander Vailtor watched the blue and white marble of Earth one last time before his ship turned and warped away from the system, forever. In his final, official report, he wrote a sentence that would become required reading in every military academy across the galaxy. "Do not measure a species by its weapons or its technology. Measure it by what it refuses to abandon." Humans were no longer an unknown quantity. They were a warning. They were a lesson. They were living, breathing proof that the simple, stubborn will to survive could be the most powerful weapon in the universe. Earth did not set out to conquer the stars. It didn't have to. It changed them. And on the day that history was rewritten, the galaxy learned one final, indelible truth. When humans draw a line in the sand, they do not step back. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more tales from across the cosmos. See you next time.